This morning, BMW announced that they are partnering with Figure AI to integrate their humanoid robots into their factory as workers. This marks the first commercial deal Figure has signed since it was founded in 2022. While the company didn't disclose how many robots BMW will be using, the partnership will start with small quantities and expand if performance targets have been met. Figure's humanoids will be deployed in BMW's new manufacturing facility in South Carolina, the largest automotive exporter in the US, which currently employs 11,000 people. They will be integrated into the manufacturing process, including the body shop, sheet metal, and warehouse, in the next 12 to 24 months after being trained to perform specific tasks. We have designed the robot to be safe next to humans. Working with BMW on automation in a manufacturing facility is a huge validator for us in the space, Adcock said. So this is obviously a huge deal, and is this the first of many to come? What do you think about all this, Hans?
Yeah, so the significance of this is very large that a lot of people have basically said that the Tesla Optimus project is kind of a pipe dream, that there's nothing to that. And this announcement really shows that people in the industry are taking this seriously. That Figure's robot is not capable of doing a lot of the things that the Optimus robot is capable of doing yet, but they need to get it to the point where they have a lot of validation testing that they can get it in actual useful scenarios, and they can check, how is the software doing? But then also, how is the hardware doing? Because developing the hardware is an entirely separate challenge from developing the software. And they have a very intricate and interesting hardware design. But until you actually get it into situations where you're really putting it through its paces, you don't know where it's going to fail. And you definitely need to know those things before you actually move on to the step of manufacturing it in large scale. And so this is a great partnership for Figure, because factory work is going to be one of the best early use cases for humanoid robotic. I mean, the dream eventually is that we will have humanoid robots that can come into a home and do all sorts of things that we would find helpful around the house, like cook dinner and clean toilets and fold laundry, all that kind of stuff. But really, that future is a lot further away than a robot like this being able to sit in a manufacturing facility and do the same task over and over and over and over again all day long, especially one that has been designed to be very ergonomic and easy for a human to do in, like 1 minute increments. So a lot of the auto manufacturers, their cycle time at each station is about 60 seconds long. And so you can imagine, as a human, if you're sitting there and you're doing the exact same motion every minute for an 8-hour shift, that gets really repetitive. And it means that, you can't be lifting anything that's too heavy. And so anytime they are moving parts that are heavier, they have lift assists. And there's a lot of stuff that goes into making that something that's feasible for a human to do. And it's hard to keep people in those jobs, and those jobs pay pretty well. And so it's really simple stuff. And that is the area where I think robots will first be used in a way that is profitable for the company and gives a runway for the robot manufacturers. They can sell these things for a lot of money because, if you think about how much money one manufacturing line worker makes in a year, you're talking upwards of $50,000 a year with benefits. And if you do have a robot that can operate at all day, then what you have is the ability of that robot to be worth 3.5 times what a person would work, because you got, 3 shifts a day. And then if it can work 7 days a week instead of 5 days a week, then a robot could be worth in a year the same as 3.5 humans. And so I think that's one of the reasons why it's incredibly important. And when you think about a company like Figure compared to a company like Tesla, Tesla has lots of internal use cases where they can deploy the Optimus robot and they can do this testing, they can do this design validation inside the company, and it's not going to cost, the cost to make these bots is relatively small compared to the overall cash balance that they have and their operating budget. A company like Figure, on the other hand, if it costs them $1 million to create one robot prototype, Well, that's $1 million worth of cash flow that they don't have. And so, they have to figure out a way to prove out the unit economics of this figure bot as quickly as possible. And so these commercial partnerships are going to be the path to market that they have to take. And so it's cool to see the first of these, for that company specifically. But it's also a first for automotive companies outside of Tesla to really express interest in this technology. And I think it signals a shift towards much more advanced AI powered humanoid robotics. I think I'm obviously biased, but I think that the next decade, that is going to be one of the huge technology shifts that's going to change the world even more so than we saw the iPhone change the world, from 2008 until 2020.
So, Hans, we've seen a lot of like announcements like this that never come into fruition. Do you think this is just PR for BMW, or do you think this is a legitimate deal?
That's a good question. It's really hard to say for BMW. We do know that they have been increasing their proportion of EVs, and they've been somewhat more successful in that transition than some of their other German counterparts. But they definitely have made a lot of announcements that really haven't come all the way through. I think right now for BMW, most likely this is just exploratory that, they haven't made, according to this announcement, any strong commitments to purchase a certain number of things. And the technology is still in a very infant stage that, the hardware is not all the way to where it needs to be yet. And neither the software is definitely a long ways from where it needs to be ultimately as well. And so they don't know exactly which jobs are going to be the best jobs for this robot to do. They just understand that it's a field that is important for them to have some involvement in and to understand how useful it can be. And that, if you believe that Moore's law is going to give us 1,000 times more compute, in the not too distant future than we have today for roughly the same price, then you know that this is going to be an incredibly important piece of technology in the near term future. And so you want to dip your toes in the water. You want to have some involvement. You want to be in the game so that you can adapt that technology to your operation as quickly as possible. I love one of the things that I heard CERN Basher say today that, it's basically become abundantly clear that every large company needs to have an AI strategy today. And if you believe that that's true, well, then you also need to have an embodied AI strategy. And so you need to be able to put that technology into useful physical form factors that can do work in a variety of places. And so I think that's why BMW is pursuing this right now. But that doesn't necessarily mean that they will ultimately be a customer for hundreds or thousands or millions of figure AI robots. It's on the table, but we'll have to kind of see how it plays out.
Do you think BMW would have like asked Tesla potentially about Optimus, or do you think that their rivalry in automotive draw them towards Figure, or do you think Tesla was even interested in working with BMW at all? Because Tesla doesn't depend on making clients right now with their humanoid robots. The humanoid robot for Tesla is more about driving the cost of goods sold down at Tesla. So do you think that conversation even happened, or do you think BMW went straight to Figure?
I would be surprised if the conversation happened. There may have been an attempt at a conversation on BMW's part, but like you said, I think Tesla is so focused on developing the product right now, and they have access to literally everything that they need to accomplish that. They have access to the software people, they have access to the machine learning training resources that they need. They have access to all of the jobs that they need to do training on. They have personnel, they have funding, and they have plenty of internal use cases where this will be valuable for them. And so they don't need anybody else to come in house. And one of the things that we know about Tesla is they move so fast that they really don't want to work with anyone else that's outside the company on a project if they don't have to, just because they know that it slows them down. And so I would be extremely shocked if we saw Tesla partnering with anyone outside of the company on the Optimus robot anytime in the near future. I definitely think that that is something that will come in time, but I don't expect it to be for quite a while. Figure, on the other hand, they absolutely need to have this access to the same types of environments that Tesla has in house, but obviously they're not an auto manufacturer, and so they have to do these partnerships. And so I think that probably, total speculation on my part, but my guess would be that people at BMW are looking at this project thinking, oh my gosh, how are we going to survive if we don't have that type of technology for ourselves? And they know that they're not going to be able to get that directly from Tesla in a time frame that gives them a competitive leg to stand on. And so they started looking outside to other options. And apparently, Figure AI is, the one that came to the top of the list for them, at least at this stage. That doesn't mean it will be in the future. But yeah, right now they want to go ahead and dip their toes in the water with Figure.
So how do you think this looks for Sean Fain and the unions right now as this deal just happened this morning and what they're trying to do?
Yeah, I don't think it looks good. I mean, obviously, what they have been doing has put a lot of competitive pressure on the space. The more that labor prices rise, then the harder it is for human labor to compete against automated labor. And so, we've already seen tons and tons of automation in the auto industry over the last 50 years. And a lot of that development was actually driven by the rising cost of labor due to unions. And unions have a place. I don't have anything against them. I think that there's a lot of things that they do that are good, but I think Stephen Mark Ryan makes a really good point. At this point in time, if they wanted to do the best thing that they could do for their union workers, they would work out a deal with the auto companies to actually reduce wages, but try and figure out a way for those union workers to actually participate in the profits that could be generated from increased automation over time. But yeah, neither the union or the companies are interested in a deal like that right now. And so we're going to continue to see these same types of union deals moving forward, which is only going to accelerate the motivations of large manufacturers in all types of goods, not just automotive, to just increasingly rely on automation. And as artificial intelligence becomes part of the equation, all of that automation is going to be able to do many, many more things that humans do today, that have never been possible up until this point.
And how difficult do you think it's going to be for Figure to actually go from, custom designing these robots, making them each by hand, to actually manufacturing them at scale as they want to take on more clients and start to produce thousands of robots? Do you think they're underestimating the difficulty of that?
Well, definitely. I mean, every startup honestly underestimates the challenge that they're in for when they get going. And there are very few companies that survive the scale going from something that is a prototype to mass production, especially in a world where, Elon said he's wouldn't be surprised if we have billions of AI powered robots in the 2040s. And so that kind of manufacturing scale is absolutely insane, hard to even fathom. But that said, I do think that, humanoid robotics is an area where the prototype is much more difficult relative to the scale manufacturing side than automotive. So when Elon talks about the prototype being easy and production being hard, a lot of times he is talking specifically about the auto industry and vehicles, or even the aerospace industry is kind of the same way. But the challenges of manufacturing something that has a lot less raw materials that go into it in a robot, and a lot more similar parts should be easier, definitely from a manufacturing standpoint. The challenges that they'll face really will end up being in the supply chain. If they want to really scale up the actuators, that's going to be something that's very difficult. Having good partners to scale up the chip manufacturing so that they can have good control of these things, that's all AI native, is going to be another real challenge. And but that said, those technologies specifically are a lot more inside of the wheelhouse of companies that have originated out of Silicon Valley than automotive. And so, yes, I do think, like we said, they're underestimating it to an extent, but I don't think it's going to be nearly as difficult as trying to scale up Tesla. And so they have a better shot at it. than they would if they were a Lucid or a Rivian or some company like that.
Yeah, and you wonder, from BMW's standpoint, maybe making this partnership now and bringing Figure in to help them get their software training, maybe that opens up a partnership down the road where BMW actually helps them manufacture the hardware of the robot itself because, Figure doesn't have that background.
I said, yeah, the thing about that is that they're gonna have lots of different manufacturers as clients, and so, if they are able to get to the point where their prototype really is robust and successful and extremely useful in a manufacturing setting, they will have their pick of high quality manufacturers to actually partner with to help increase that scale, because those people will be their customers and they'll have strong relationships with them.
Yeah, so Figure is they are in a good position, but when you look at a company like Apple, Apple has never been the first mover on their products. With the iPhone, they weren't the first company to make a smartphone, but they came in late, and they came in hard, and they really deliver on quality. So with the humanoid robot market, how important do you think being a first mover is as compared to someone that might be able to come in later with more money and more expertise?
Um, I think that the total addressable market here is so large that there's room for first movers and last movers to all be successful here as long as they keep their costs under control. Moving into it, that actually does get easier, the deeper into the development cycle that you go, but having a strong name becomes much more difficult to develop the deeper into the product development cycle you go. So I think there are, benefits and drawbacks in both directions, but I would be surprised if, anyone who can make something that is extremely useful that doesn't have extremely high cost of operation, I think it would be hard for them not to be successful in the business.
And I had a really interesting comment on a YouTube video yesterday, and I just want to bring this up very quickly. And it's a little bit off topic, but the guy was basically asking how he doesn't actually trust neural networks anymore. Sorry, you're frozen. Oh, there you are. He doesn't trust neural networks anymore because he was saying how, as he's like gotten older, he'll try to reach for something and he'll miss or something like that. And like sometimes humans make mistakes, and like some people aren't as coordinated as others. But do you think that the more they train teleoperated systems on robots that you can actually get precision with neural networks? Like, do you think that you will be able to thread a needle by the end of the year as Elon Musk predicted?
I think that there's definitely a good chance of that. I was actually having a conversation with James Dowman, Scott Walter yesterday, and this was actually one of the topics that we were discussing. And the way that James explained it was that, they have basically, they can create a special neural net that is a layer in between the intended operations that the original neural net is trying to accomplish, and whatever they sense the actual output is in real time. And so it's basically measuring the error and saying, if I think that I'm touching my nose with my eyes closed, but I actually touch over here, then it has that layer in between that is basically a transformation layer that can adjust those and basically recalibrate the overall thing. And I think that we'll actually see that type of functionality included in a lot of different areas. For example, in full self driving, I think that we will have layers that perform a similar type function for maybe the weather in a certain area, or the different driving cultures in different areas, or different in Texas, we do interstates differently than in a lot of other states. We have a lot of the on-ramp roads that you don't see in other areas, that we call frontage roads. And so, that creates some peculiarity in the way that traffic flows. And those types of things, I think, could be actually implemented in a special kind of additional neural net that sits in between, the core functionality that is going to be inside of FSD and then the complete outputs. So that will be one example that I think we'll probably see in the not too distant future, and then there will be lots of other ones in a very similar way.
Awesome. Yeah, so that gives me confidence. But I want to thank you for coming on today, Hans. It's always great to talk to you. And is there anything else you want to say to my beloved audience?
Yeah, thanks for having me today. I always love talking about these topics, and yeah, you're a great host. And I just really appreciate you and hope that everyone watching has a wonderful day.
Yeah, and make sure you guys are following Hans C. Nelson on YouTube and Twitter. You know the drill. And yeah, thanks, guys. Talk to you soon.